want to give you just a quick tip, very small tip here when you're writing your memoir scenes. And that is not to move forward and talk about something before we actually see it happen. And so I'll explain what that means in a second. Let me just read out this short paragraph from a personal narrative of one of my students. So she writes, "Dad was hysterical. By this time, my mom had taken the phone and talked to my uncle on the other line. This was the first time I had ever seen my dad cry. Dad had always been the strong one, keeping his feelings and emotions to himself, never showing any sign of weakness." So what is it that she's talking about before it happens? It is this line right here. Let me just highlight this. This was the first time I had ever seen my dad cry. But in the story, we actually haven't seen the father cry yet. We only find out he's crying at the end of this sentence, which is kind of abstract. It's talking about this is the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry. All we need to do, again, quick tip, is just dad was hysterical. I mean, you could explain that in more detail. You could show what hysterical looks like and then say, dad cried. Tears streamed down dad's face. Then you can say, this was the first time I had ever seen my dad cry. So just make sure you're not going ahead and saying, commenting on things that haven't actually happened yet. Also, the details about dad being a strong one, keeping his feelings and emotions to himself, never showing any sign of weakness. If this was a bigger piece, not a little 500-word story where you're trying to explain everything for the reader. If this had been a 200-page book, a memoir, you would have had a bunch of scenes where dad is showing dad is strong, dad being cool and maybe not showing his feelings. Then when this happens, it's a shock to the reader because we in the story have never seen father like this. But of course, this is a short little story that my student wrote, and she's trying to explain a lot of things, explaining the significance of dad crying here. So maybe she had to say that. She had to tell us that. But in a bigger book, a bigger project, you wouldn't have come out and said any of that because we would have never seen him. So when we do see him cry, it's a big deal to us as the reader. But the main point is don't prefigure or talk about something before it happens. Show us this action of crying, and then you can state the significance of it after.